Welcome back to The Circle. This week, we're exploring how men can shift from living in shoulds and have-tos to connecting with what they truly want and their desires. We'll reflect on the energy behind our actions, how to reframe obligation into conscious choice, and take it deeper by talking about sitting with discomfort, noticing impulses, and deciding from a place of intention. Tim, are you ready to go all in?
I am.
Great. So men's work isn't just about thinking differently. It's about noticing how patterns show up in our bodies and our daily lives. Whether it's the urge to fidget, the voice telling us what we should or shouldn't do, or the discomfort of just sitting still. These practices invite us to pause, reconnect with ourselves, and choose from a place of presence and freedom. So this week, as you know, I facilitated the Men's Sharing Circle and the Men's Embodiment Circle, where I played with these themes and explored them with the participants. And for our audience, Tim got to actually participate this week. So Tim, I want to check in with you. What was your experience like during these circles?
Well, it felt to me when you were leading the circles that you were really talking about the difference between an I should do, or I must do, or I have to, versus an I choose to. And so one of the things I noticed was just contemplating that. And, you know, there was an exercise you gave us where we added the because, right? So I should do this, is because maybe someone told me I should, or there's this cultural expectation that I should. A lot of what men's work is like, I should do this because this is what men do. And then if you think, well, am I choosing to do that? And what is my because? Because it was that part that really impacted me. Oh, because I want to be happier. I want to be more connected. I want to be more authentically myself. When you connect with the reason, the because, the why to what you are choosing to do, it becomes, in my opinion, more powerful. So that was one of the takeaways for me was, if I'm choosing to do something, it's easier to choose that when I have a powerful why, a powerful because. Yeah. So even our morning practice that we've been doing the morning pages, and I added a different component to it this morning, I got clear about my because of these circles in this practice. So, this is why I'm doing it. So now it makes me want to do it a little bit more, even though there will still be moments when I'd rather just sit and have coffee. And like the because fueled me into action that I am grateful I took.
Yeah, when I first did this practice before I brought it into Circle I was really struggling with these like overwhelming feelings of obligation and duty. Like the feeling of being committed to something, the feeling of being obligated to something or someone was really starting to chip away at like my autonomy and my freedom. And I started to feel like I didn't have choices anymore. And so it really I did this practice about a year ago. And like at that point I was just feeling in a really like prickly place where I was like, I had all these things that I was like telling myself that I had to do, that I should do, that I felt obligated to do. And I was really like through this practice, really starting to help myself reframe and discover and explore what's the underlying motivation for why I'm doing something. And if I wasn't able to really find what my because was, I cut it out of my life, or I tried to anyway. Because if my true motivation was like money or something like that, then like I can find other ways to do money or to find money in this world. It doesn't have to be something that I feel super obligated to.
Yeah.
If I can find something that I can reframe with I choose to because it brings me happiness and also money, right? That's a win. But if I'm feeling that it's like, this is just an obligation, like that to me is a red flag.
Well, this is why I feel like that idea of does it spark joy? Mm-hmm. I'm realizing now is actually a really powerful question because that's because or why enough. This makes me really happy. Okay, that's enough. We are guaranteed one life. So things that make you happy are reason enough to include them. So it's a powerful question. But also in the doing of these two circles, Another thing that I came to understand or had reminded that I thought was really powerful was the nature of our cultural conditioned shoulds. So as I listened to the men sharing, I heard a lot of like, well, I should be successful, do more work, be really efficient, be super organized, be very proficient. Like the shoulds that were so common were also very shared, right? And I think I even mentioned in one of my reflections in the circle, I wasn't hearing any, I should take a break. I should, focus on my self-care. When we think about shoulds, just like anything, nothing's all good or all bad, right? But it's kind of spoken about in this time as all bad, I think partially because we focus on those things, right? Like, I should allow myself some time to recuperate, to rest, to be quiet, to be still, but those aren't the shoulds we're talking about. The shoulds are work harder, do more, be better, look better, excel, achieve. And that I realized was prevalent among all these men. I think men are burdened by a very specific kind of should, which I think men's work is trying to address.
Yeah. I mean, the practice came from Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, and in that he talks about that should is one of the most violent words that we can use against ourselves and others because it can remove choice. It can remove autonomy, and humans are not meant to be slaves, right? So like that's what he says in the book. And so I think that when we do hear these shoulds, it's that we think that there's no other choice. We don't think that there's another option. And even when you're saying like, I should model a healthy relationship with rest for myself and for others, my immediate like subconscious, like if I were to finish that sentence is, but I should rest more, but, right? There's automatically in my brain, in my programming, something that's telling me like already that there's a right and a wrong here. Right. And that I don't have a choice. I have like, okay, like I should rest, but I have these other things that I should be doing.
Sure. I hear that. And I suspect a lot of people can relate to that and have that experience. There's a part of me that also feels like language is meant and has a purpose. So I don't think a concept like should is like entirely bad. And I think it's as everything is, and what we talk about, if we bring consciousness to it, if I am consciously shoulding or looking for or asking for shoulds in a conscious way, I go to a mentor. I have these 3 options in front of me, teacher that I know well and trust. Which should I do, in your opinion? I do not think that is, I understand linguistically why I'm like, I don't have to try to eliminate that word from my vocabulary. I have to try to eliminate the consciousness of mindless obligation.
Yes.
And bring in a lot of choice and awareness. So I still want to use the word should if I choose to.
Absolutely. Right. It's the impact of language on our self-awareness. Like that language helps us to give meaning to our experience. Right. And it's like, I think that's the beautiful part of it. It's like, again, there isn't a moralistic judgment here with this word. Like use it, but can you use it consciously?
Do you think that I should reconsider my choice to use the word should? I'm just joking.
I think that you are welcome to explore that.
Okay.
Right.
I choose to.
Yeah.
I'm choosing to explore it.
Right. And it's a pretty powerful practice. Anything that can give us a moment of pause to think a little bit. It's so funny. My therapist last week was literally, because I just got laid off from my job, y'all. So like my default programming is to like go right into what's next, like go into immediate problem solving. Like I have to find out what's next for me because of programming. What should I do next?
Yeah.
Right. And the prompt was like, can you just pause? Can you sit? Like when an impulse comes up, and this was a lot of the inspiration for the circles, was like when an impulse comes up, can I sit with it for just a couple minutes and really think on it?
Yeah.
And just like listen to what my thoughts are telling me, what my body is telling me, what the universe is telling me, what anyone is telling me. Can I just pause and listen for a few minutes? And so I think that's the power of a practice like this. Is it's not a recommendation to completely eliminate have to, must, should, duty, obligation. It's anything like that. It's just noticing.
Well, we talked about the Kabbalistic teaching of restriction. I'm pretty certain
I
we
think
did.
so, but remind us.
It's the same idea. Injecting conscious pause before falling into habit or grasping at something because you really
like
want
if somebody
it.
offers you
Yeah,
something.
and you have that, and they use the image of the light bulb. I think in the filament keeping those two poles separated is why the light bulb burns. If the two poles come together, it gets super bright, but then it burns out, right? That restriction is like the thing that is necessary for it to continue, right? So it's all about. And by the way, I'm not an expert in Kabbalah, but my understanding of it is that it's about bringing that conscious pause. And I really can't think of too many examples from my own life when I have brought a conscious pause and then regretted it. Because that conscious pause can be 5 seconds, 10 seconds if it needs to. But, before I fall into, I want to yell at you, or I want to withdraw from you, or I want to make like a wild choice or a big impactful choice, I decide to pause. I can't think of one example of when I've been like, I wish I hadn't paused. I wish I'd been really impulsive.
Right, exactly. But I can come up with at least a dozen times that I regretted an impulse. Right? Like so often that I'm like, why? Why did I act? Why did I speak? Why did I do like that thing?
Well, this is the teaching of Kabbalah, which is like short-term pleasure, long-term discomfort, short-term discomfort, which would be that pause. Because especially when it's a good thing, to be like, I really want that thing, and you still bring the pause, long-term fulfillment. It's like the impulse is so easily regrettable because it's fast, and more than fast, it's unconscious. Mm-hmm. The pause means I had enough awareness to know I needed to stop and think about this even for a second. So think about all the choices in our lives we've made without thinking. And then you're like, so if I thought about it even for a second, that's better than none at all.
Absolutely. I mean, on the topic of discomfort, moving into embodiment circle, like I brought in a very long seated practice.
That's right.
With the specific intention of being like, hey, y'all, you're about to get uncomfortable. You're about to actually sit in discomfort. And so like during that practice, like, I was sitting too. So I was starting to get uncomfortable. And the prompt was like, it's okay to notice discomfort, but can you catch yourself before the impulse to react to that discomfort takes over, right? So the simple example is like, my nose itches. Not even thinking about it.
For our listeners, he quickly swatted his nose.
And they might have just heard it on the mic.
Yeah.
Or like, my knee is starting to, get a little, uncomfortable. I'm starting to get a little sensitive. Like, it's okay. I'm not telling, or I wasn't instructing anyone, like, don't move, like sit there in your discomfort, right? Like, I can be a sadist, but like I'm not bringing in my sadism into the circle, right? Like that's just not what I'm doing, right?
Different episode.
Different episode.
Yeah.
But like
which is coming, I think.
But I gave full permission and like instruction of like, I want you to move. I want you to tend to yourself if you can consciously choose to do it, right? Like just like the only ask that I had was like, can you bring a little bit of attention and awareness to that?
So not specific to your practice, but piggybacking on that because it's so frequent in so many of my teachers' practices, this idea of like slow, mindful transitions. Because I think part of it isn't, do I want to move? Am I uncomfortable? I think that's sort of the easy part, to be like, I'm either uncomfortable or I'm not, and I want to move or I don't. But then when you get to that point when you're like, well, I'm on the precipice of like, I need to move because I'm so uncomfortable. In that moment, what I have observed happen so frequently is like, oh, that's the moment when we can fall so quickly into our old habits, which is like, I just want to make this feel better. And now I'm going to like completely fall out of my practice, completely lose my connection to the present moment, and just sort of satisfy this thing, scratch the itch, do what And so so many of my teachers will speak about like, if you have to move, if you're in meditation and, you feel a droplet of sweat or a fly lands on you, and it's very distracting, you don't have to suffer through it, but don't allow yourself to fall into like, oh, well, that
reaction, habit.
And we live in a world where we tend to be so fast. We tend to run so quickly to pleasure or to the cessation of pain, that we will kind of abandon everything else in pursuit of it. And I think the teachings are saying, well, you can do that, but how do you do it? And so that's why this idea of like moving slowly and mindfully, I don't think slow is necessarily like better than fast, but I think slow allows a person who's building their conscious muscle to engage their conscious muscle. So I'm assuming then there might be enlightened beings who like, I can swat the fly as quickly as I want. You're like, oh, because you've been doing this for a long time. But if you're a beginner, move slowly so you can be as mindful about it as possible.
Right. I think about that with any physical practice that I do. My impulse is to like do the movement like fast and big. This is group fitness classes, why there's struggle for me. Mm-hmm. So like Helltown Fitness, I was taking a class with Coach Tim over here the other day, and like I
am a co-founder of a boutique fitness studio here in Provincetown called Helltown Fitness, based around kettlebells.
And they're really great, really dynamic,
excellently programmed, excellently coached.
But what I find is that they are new movements to me. Like I did not have kettlebell experience before these classes. And like, I look around, I see you, I see other people, I see people like really like going big with their movements, going fast with their movements. And I've tried that before and it doesn't work for me because my body doesn't understand those mechanics. And so I have to slow it way down. And so sometimes I have to like, sacrifice a little bit of like time. Like if we've got 30, 45 seconds in an exercise, like I may only be able to get through a handful of them because I really have to slow my body down and let that the mechanics really sit in before maybe the next round I can now get 4 or 5 in. So when you talk about like, they're like moving slowly and mindfully, right? Like at first, yeah, that's kind of the invitation. And then over time, once you build up that familiarity, like, yeah, and you might be able to move a little bit quicker, but the challenge always is like, can you recognize if you've just gone into habit routine, right? Rather than being a little bit more mindful or conscious of it. So like when you talk about like transitioning from like either a posture to another. I remember one circle you led that I thought was really, really brilliant where we did.
Well, they were all brilliant.
I mean, it's true.
Thank you. Yeah.
Where it was all about like linking breath to movement and trying to be as smooth between poses or postures as possible and noticing the moment of shift. So if we were doing like a down dog to a plank, right? Like, could we make that a smooth movement and notice the moment that we like shifted back and kind of that like microsecond of transition into the next one. And instead of like rushing through it, just really like taking time to notice. And I still take that practice with me almost daily.
I mean, I think it's one of the primary teachings I received from the yoga asana practice, this idea of like mindfully, consciously linking things together. It's why vinyasa is such a profound mindfulness practice. And I think I've said this before, but I will tell people, I'm like, be the melody, not the collection of notes that are adjacent to each other. That to me is like what the strict vinyasa practice is aiming to do. And so it is, to get back onto our topic, like this idea of like, it is choosing to engage in a particular way. It's choosing to pay attention in a particular way. And that that ability is something that we can cultivate. It's also something that we need to practice and build, just like anything else. You want stronger biceps, you go to the gym and you start lifting progressively heavier and heavier weights over a period of time. Same is true with yoga asana and consciousness practice. When I first started yoga asana, let's take Warrior 2 for an example. I was maybe thinking about like one or two things, like my knees stacked over my ankle and my shoulders stacked over my hips, right? But through now decades of practice, I can think about my knee and my back leg and my ankles and my pelvis and my shoulders and my pubic bone and my head and my gaze and my breath and my intention. That came through this sort of progressive practice of building that. And so, that's really what we're talking about.
Yeah, understanding the mechanics of the body and that gradual awareness of it.
Yeah.
Right, to be able to then see and experience the full melody. Right. At first, you for me, right, and it sounds like you 1 to 2 notes, right, at a time, right, learning 1 to 2 notes, and then with the over time practicing, you start to hear the melody.
Well, and I think so. This is when we think about choosing versus shoulding, right? We also have to understand our capacity. We talked about this with our edges, so I can't just choose to be a master at a thing, right? I can choose to engage in a process that will take me step by step towards that thing. So I think there's a power in the awareness of that too. So you're living your life, you're listening to this podcast, you're like, oh, I should a lot, or I must to a lot, or I have to a lot. I feel these things in my life a lot. And now I want to shift it to I choose to. Well, chances are you're not going to be able to choose to do everything in your life perfectly starting right now. I wish you could. I wish I could. I wish there was a light switch and we could just flip it and just be like, everything changes. So when we talk about this work and how we bring it in, well, then maybe we need to start, reasonably and small. So maybe I'm going to choose to pay more attention to an aspect of my life or one part of my engagement. And I can start to build my muscle in there. And so, if you're wondering, I would suggest, especially if you are listening in a challenging moment, maybe start with the area of your life that needs the most attention, right? But practice there. And then in time, you're like, oh, well, now I can choose to pay attention to my kids and my primary relationship and my job and my friendships and my hobby and my self-care. But you might not be able to start there.
Right. It's, I fall into the tendency where I try to take big bites. I think I said this before, even physically with food, right? I take big bites. And so that's my life. That's everything. I'm an all-in type of person. I go big. And what that ends up doing is it can overwhelm me very quickly. And so part of my practice is pausing and taking it bit by bit.
I was watching Instagram and there was this video. It was a funny video of this girl who was like, I'm going to make sandwiches until I find a boyfriend. And she made this gigantic sandwich, but she made it with a steak. And I thought, since you're talking about big bites, I was like, that sandwich looks delicious if I had a fork and a knife. I'm like, I don't know that I could bite through that steak. Do you think you could bite through a steak?
I definitely would try. If somebody served me a sandwich, big fluffy brioche bun,
yeah,
plus steak,
onions and
plus everything,
sauce,
and it was just this giant. I would give it my all.
Okay, well, I respect and appreciate that. Yeah. I wonder how successful you would be. I wonder how successful I would be. I wonder if I would look like a puppy with a leather slipper in my mouth.
I think I would look like Paris Hilton doing the Carl Jr.'s ad.
You know,
Or was it Paris Hilton who had like the giant burger and she's like on the car?
I have literally no idea what you're referring to, but I can tell you this: when I describe you as Paris Hilton. You're like, who's Eric? I'm like, oh, my friend who looks like Paris Hilton.
Stars are blind.
Yeah, he sits on the car hood with a burger. Is what I say, and people are like, oh,
That
him.
one.
Yeah. It's crazy how like effective that is.
All right. So on that, I just got a ping. Like we're starting to talk a little bit about desires, right? Like I'm now desiring
A burger
or a big old like juicy steak, sandwich.
Okay.
And so I do want to explore a little bit the linkage here between like, the impulses and bringing in awareness, and then maybe like starting to identify the desires. It's that evolution of like have to, should to, must to like I choose to because, right? That because kind of can be that underlying desire and motivation. And so, I think as a queer man, right, I was told a lot of like what I shouldn't do. I shouldn't like other guys, right? And I think that what that did was it really stifled my desire for a long time, and like started to build a lot of like shame in my life, my sex life, and the way that I was expressing myself was built up with a lot of shame because I was told I shouldn't, right? And like it's been a long exercise. I was like really starting to explore what is that I actually want, not just like in my like professional life and my interpersonal, but like in my sexual life, right? Like what is it that I want? What is it that I'm desiring? And like that's been like years of like unpacking, right? All the things that like I was told I shouldn't do.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a queer person, well, I mean, you're kind of blowing my mind right now with this idea of like thinking about what I'm choosing. I think for a long time, I had this feeling of I should take what I can get because it's, I shouldn't be doing it in the first place. So like kind of grabbing what you can. And it feels like this idea of choice and asking like what would I choose if I could is a whole new way of thinking about it.
And just taking that moment, right? Like I've sat and like really tried to like unpack some of the things that I rarely actually want, right? Like you don't have to take it to the sexual realm, just like thinking of like professionally, like what is it that I want to do now that I have an opportunity to have like the space to explore without a job right now? Like what is it that I want to do? And I'm in a privileged position right now where like I'm going to have a little bit of space to explore that, and I don't have to like jump right to the next. And so like, I think I'm going to continue doing this exercise. I'm going to do my own table and really try to figure out like, what's underneath, what is going to bring joy for me. And then, just continuing to bring that to more aspects of my life.
Yeah, I think there's power in allowing yourself the opportunity to even say, I don't know if I like that. I don't know if I want that, but I know I probably need to try it on some level to get a sense of it, and then allowing yourself that, right? To be like, oh, I'm going to try a thing, and like maybe I'm going to like it, maybe I'm not, and then like not having any shame around it. I think maybe I've told you this story, but I had a friend, an acquaintance in New York City when I was living there who wanted to be humiliated. It was like part of his sort of fantasy and what he enjoyed. And I was like, I can try. I'm like, I've never done that. And so I tried it. I'm only laughing because it's, I tried it, and I realized that we were on like it was a phone call. Actually, we weren't doing anything in person in that moment. I was like, oh, I'm way too nurturing for this. I'm just like not the right person. And so then, we kind of completed that experience, and I spoke to him a few days later, and spoke my truth about that. But I look back on it and I'm like, well, I'm really glad I tried, because it was still a very sweet, consensual sort of exploratory moment. I think he was probably pretty aware of the fact that this wasn't like my wheelhouse either, He didn't say that, but like I think it was pretty obvious. but I'm like, I pat myself on the back for like trying. How many people have like had an entire life that included like a sexual intimate component and have never tried something that wasn't like expected or typical, right?
Exactly. Right. And I like that. Going back, it's so much is said because you should or shouldn't do something.
Yeah.
Right. It creates taboo. Right.
Yeah.
It creates, and it's like, will you give yourself permission to explore that, to try it? Right. And can you create an environment where that's something that you can consciously do? Like in this scene that you were, participating in, right? Like consciously going in and be like, well, we're going to try.
Yeah.
See what happens.
We're going to see what happens. Yeah.
Do I like it? Do I not like it? Right. And I'm just like being aware of that. And sometimes I think too, like in gay culture specifically, I think I've gotten the messaging of like, I should like enjoy something. I should enjoy going to a sex party. I should enjoy going to the club and cruising. I should, like, to be a good gay man, like this is what I should do. I should be in an open relationship. I should do all these things. And like that's not me, right? Like, and I've struggled with it for years.
Well, because there's also silent shoulds, right? I'm making this up now, but this idea, I feel like I felt this pressure of, well, I look around me and this is what everyone else is doing. So someone doesn't need to walk up to me necessarily and say, oh, you should want to come to the club with me and like do the drugs and dance all night or whatever the agenda is, for me to get the messaging that like, oh, there is the silent should that, we have to kind of hold and metabolize.
Yeah, I love that. It's like the silent should of expected.
Is it the should? I'm sorry, I just cut you off, please.
That like it's these like societal expectations that you don't need somebody to specifically call it out, but you feel you can feel the pressure. I mean, this is peer pressure. This is group pressure, and like that doesn't have to come with a like, you've got to like jump off this bridge with me. It can really come from just like seeing other people in this type of behavior. And if you're anything like me, who is like, I'm trying to figure myself out anyway, like I have to look at other people. And if like the other people that are like me, or I think are like me, are doing this specific thing, then but I don't think that I should be doing that. I start to go inward real quick. And I start to like self-criticize myself, where I'm like, oh, like, I'm not doing that. Like, am I broken?
What's wrong with me?
What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't have that desire to have sex at a bar, right? I don't have a desire to have public sex. I don't even know that I've had an impulse to do that. I've had these pressures that I've experienced, not something that somebody has put on me that I know of, I'm aware of. I also blacked out at a lot of bars, so I don't know. But like I can, from what I can remember, like I don't think that it was like explicitly put on me, but I had a lot of like internal dialogue of being like, oh, I'm going out tonight. Like I should go to that club and I should.
Well, like, I mean, I think a lot of people are having these shoulds because I've heard people talk about their night the next day, sometime during the next day. And it is sort of judged based on like what they were able to accomplish based on a should. Because the idea is, or at least in the town we live, or in the experience I've been having recently, oh, you should go out, you should have a super fun time, you should probably get a lot of attention, and you should like have sex. And so I've watched people like be like, well, how was your night? And like, and it was only because you're like, oh, you didn't end up having sex for any number of reasons. That should was so powerful, it was able to change the rest of your night, even though you might have had a great time dancing, right? Or whatever the thing was you were doing. So I think there's a real power in that, and I think a lot of us feel that pressure.
Yeah, like, why am I going out, right? Like, and I don't think this is, I think we've talked about this a couple times. This is not like bar shaming or anything like that. Like, it's just the invitation of like, can you move it from, I should go out, I should try to go like, hook up with somebody to like, that's actually what I want. That's truly what you want, and that's what you're desiring, and that's how you want to accomplish it, go for it. Like, live your truth. Fulfill your authenticity.
Yeah.
That's just not my truth right now. Not saying that it won't be like anytime. Like, I'm not like, it's not a hard no, and there's not a judgment behind it. It really is. It's coming from a place of self-compassion for myself because of how much emotional strife I've gone through, putting that expectation on myself and thinking that I'm a bad gay, right? Like, I'm a bad gay because I don't want to do that. That's not a desire of mine. Right?
Yeah, I think the idea that people would do it if they really chose to do it, I think there could be an entire episode about like, how do we understand what it is we genuinely want, and how do we pursue that want? I mean, so much of the coaching training that I've done and some of this work is really understanding like, well, what do you want? What a simple question. Like, what do you want? But the answer isn't simple. So, I mean, obviously you're listening or you're watching and you can say like, oh, I want money, I want good health, I want great sex, I want, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, but if you keep going, like, well, what do you really want? What do you really want? So I agree with you. If what you really want is that experience, then you should absolutely have it. But I do think that, and one of the reasons we're doing this podcast is because I think our world and our community, we need to be reminded of the value of that process, the process of trying to uncover, well, what is it I want and why do I want it?
Yes.
What do I want and why do I want it? And if I'm clear about those things and then I still want it, go for it. But it's been part of my fitness journey. A lot of people want a beautiful body, and that can mean so many different things, right? But whatever your conception of a beautiful body is for you, you might want it. Why? Do you want it because you want other people to find you desirable? Because you want to look good in clothes? Because, there can be any number of reasons, but like, get clear about the why. And for me, and it can be a combo why. Like, of course, I want people to think I'm sexy. I want people to desire me. But I mainly want to feel strong and to be able to move in ways that are important to me. When we do our affirmations, I think if I went to go back, there's just a few things I've done every time on my affirmations list. And one of them is like my yoga practice, and like specifically my yoga asana practice. I get so much value out of it. So I want my body to be strong because I want to be able to engage in this practice that helps me so much, right? To me, that feels like a powerful why. If my why was, I want to do this so that some stranger I haven't met yet might want to have sex with me, it's just a very different why. And I think there's power in understanding the differences in our whys and the ones that can actually motivate us.
Absolutely. And like, if regardless of the why, right? Like, just choose, own it. Like, we talked about authentic power a couple episodes ago, right? Like, just own it. Own
Totally.
your authentic power. And that's like, it's super hot. It's confidence boosting, right? Like it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. Right?
Yeah,
as
totally.
long as it's within like, like,
I have a training client right now who came to me, I want a bigger butt. Great. And there's no like, I want a bigger butt because I think people are going to like me with a bigger butt and I'm going to feel better and sexier with a bigger butt. Great. So we do a lot of butt stuff. Like, lots of hip extension and gluteal activation. I see that look in your face. We do a lot of appropriate biomechanic movements to activate the posterior chain.
talk fitness to me.
Yeah. And
Talk anatomy.
but there's something really great about this is a very confident person who's like very clear about their why. They're like, what do they want and why do they want it? And there's some, as you just said, like a real confidence in that. Great, cool.
I can get on board. Let's go.
Let's fucking do it. Yeah. Let's go. It's when it's like, oh, I'm like not so clear that you're like, oh, it becomes a little bit less trustable. or a little bit harder to understand. Yeah.
RuPaul had a show very briefly. I think it was called Good Work, where it was about folks.
Work with a Q or an ERK?
I think it was, so the premise of the show was that it was people that really wanted plastic surgery or some sort of like cosmetic procedure done.
Yeah.
And so, RuPaul has the famous things like, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love somebody else? And so like for this specific show, he said like, if you can't love yourself, maybe go get some good work. Right. And it was like, but it was the conscious choice. And like during the conversations he was having with people, it was like, truly, is this what you want? Right. Because we see examples of like extreme plastic surgery, and some people, right, like truly that's how they want to look. That is a desire. And it's like, it's just kind of like starting to remove the shame, because like we start to like put on this judgment. Like when I see somebody, I'm like, oh, like you should just love yourself more. Like, why do you have to get all this work done? Right? Somebody might just want it. They've gone through the exercise, they've gone through the practice, and they're like, this is how I want to look.
Yeah.
And they do it and they go for it. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to celebrate you now. Right? Because there's so much confidence and beauty in that like you're not acting from a place of impulse. You're acting from a place of like true desire. And like, anyone that's done that work, anyone that has done that processing, I applaud you.
Yeah, I think if it's a conscious choice, do it. I'm thinking now as you're telling that story about what I would do. And I've had a lot of surgeries, so I'm reluctant to do, non-mandatory or, elective procedures. But if I had a magic wand, I'd be like, oh, like I would definitely see like, well, what would it look like if my chest were bigger or my shoulders were bigger or my arms were bigger? For the listeners and viewers, like if you want to get anywhere with me, just like compliment. Tell me that I have big chest, shoulders, or arms. Yeah, I'm like,
rolls on his back like a puppy.
Yeah, I will clean your bathroom if you tell me that. I don't know why I value it so much, but it makes me feel really good. But so I think like, yeah, I probably would I would do it if I didn't have that like, no unnecessary surgery for me. But yeah, I wonder how far I would go. And I think as I'm thinking about it now, the metric would be about like how it made me feel and what I was choosing.
Correct.
As long as I was doing it for me, to be like, oh, like I feel good with this size pec, shoulder, or arm. Yeah. Well, then get it.
Right. And again, the thought process here is like going through, assessing, right, and starting to pick apart. Okay, like why am I telling myself that I have to have a bigger chest, right? Is it somebody has told me that, I have a really weak and small chest, and so like I'm telling myself now that I need this bigger chest. Okay, so I'm sitting with that, right? And now I'm gonna pull that apart. I'm gonna say like, okay, like, I can work with that. I can work with that trauma or that bullying that happened at some point. Okay, like I've worked through that, but I still have a desire, right? Like, and I'm doing the work. I'm putting through the reps of like really sitting with this and like then acting. Because I also like, just being mindful that I like not saying like wanting to advocate for like go do whatever you want, right? Like it's still like the invitation of like
mindful, conscious choices.
Yeah.
Well, so let's bring it back to men's work then. So one of the benefits of men's work, whether we're doing embodiment, like movement, posture, breath, visualization, sound, attention, inquiry, questions, journaling, any of these things, it's to help us get a wider view of ourselves and start to really look at how we are engaging, and then start to shine the light on like, well, why did I do that? Did I want to do that? My yoga teachers talk about this idea of like getting to the root cause. So they said like the practices of yoga are like radical because you get to the root. So you don't just put a Band-Aid on a cut. You ask yourself, well, what was I doing when I cut myself? Like, what was happening in that moment when I got cut? And like, was it I got distracted, like a bell rang, or I wasn't paying attention, or whatever the thing was. And so that was the example of like, so getting to the root. So the practices of men's work allow us to start to recognize these sort of root causes, these root habits, patterns in our lives. And then the more we can recognize them, the more we can start to decide, is that serving me? Am I, so, and this is where like, so once I recognize, oh, there's this behavior that exists in me or in my life or in my habits, have I chosen it? Was it chosen for me? Was it shoulded on me? Was it have to'd on me or must to'd on me? Because, and what do I want to do now? And what do I want to do now? And why do I want to do that? Right? I know that can sound like a lot of work, but the alternative is continue sort of unconsciously doing what you're doing and then just sort of like bumping into all the obstacles as they inevitably.
And succumbing to all the impulses, all the reactions, right? Like just like becoming that walking reaction. One of my favorite things that you say during practice. I mean, I love all the things that you say.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. We're learning.
Yeah. Especially after you've done a pump and you've got this massive chest. Just anyway.
Oh yeah. I'm in the front of the room with like giant shoulders and arms. Yeah. Thank you. This is a great podcast episode. Sorry. Continue.
Is sometimes when we're like really deep into practice, like the prompt of like, who gave this to you? Right? Like it's something that may have just bubbled up, right? Or something that you're telling yourself, like, who gave that to you? Right? And just kind of like letting it like sit and then having that conscious choice of like, do I want to continue to carry this? Right? If I've been carrying around this shame, this burden that either society or my family or somebody like gave to me as I was growing up, like I've got the choice now. Do I want to keep carrying it with me, or do I want to drop it? Do I want to keep running from it, or do I want to like pause, turn around, look at it and say, no more. You've served your purpose. I'm drawing a line in the sand and putting you right there. And now I'm moving forward.
Yeah. I just had an experience that brought something up for me. Part of it happened today, actually, where I looked back on my family and I was given this message, this sort of like play it safe versus taking risks, right? And I was in a moment today where I was taking a risk and I could feel it bubbling up. This like, oh, I like this impulse of I should play it safe because that's like this old message that I received. And I realized I'm like, oh, this feels like my mom talking to me. And like not beating up on my mom. I love my mom and my mom was doing the best she could and she wanted to protect me. And if I were, a parent, I would probably want and go to great lengths to keep my child safe, right? But now I'm like, okay, but what do I choose? And so many times in my life, I've had to choose taking a risk, and it's scary, and there's no guarantee. But it helps when you're like, oh, but this deep impulse to play it safe, it isn't entirely mine. It was handed to me, and what am I going to do now? What do I choose to do now? And that choice can still be really scary. And believe me, for the example I'm talking about today, that awareness didn't make the choice less scary. It just allowed me to say, like, when I'm on my deathbed, do I want to look back and think, I was a person willing to take risks and put stakes in the ground and swing big in moments, or did I always play it safe because I was ultimately afraid? I mean, playing it safe is not always bad. You should wear bike helmets and seat belts. And
I am a big advocate of bike helmets.
Yeah, there's so many things that like, I'm not saying don't play it safe, but I'm saying when we think about like choices, sometimes, I'm gonna bet on myself. I'm gonna move to New York and try to be a professional dancer when almost everyone in my life was telling me that I shouldn't. And I'm glad I did.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So consciousness around that.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing. I think like just opening up to the possibility of what could be by simply asking and taking the pause to like ask yourself, am I playing it safe right now? And like you said, sometimes safety is the way to go. other times it's like, yeah, I have an opportunity right now to swing big. So let's go. Right. And that's really exciting, and can be thrilling. And that's really where like we're at the edge, we're at discomfort, but like, life begins at our edge sometimes. So
Yeah.
just want to take a quick tangent on bike helmets and then wrap up. So you were,
Okay. I don't know. I don't feel comfortable because I don't wear one in town.
yeah. Well, so this is about me. I'm gonna. This is not a preachy moment.
I should wear a bike helmet. Don't judge me.
This is a me. This is a me thing.
You have a bike helmet.
I have a bike helmet. I love my bike helmet.
Bike helmet.
Bike helmet. It is. It has a glittery rainbow on it, and I love it so much. I have gotten so much like I've been made fun of for it. Like people have been like, nice bike helmet. And I'm like, you know what? I have done a lot of like internal scanning, external scanning of myself. The sexiest thing on me is my brain. And I'm going to protect it. And so now I make conscious choices to protect it. And like I could succumb to this silent shoulding that if like everyone else is not wearing a helmet, oh, am I weird because I am wearing a helmet? No. I know my truth. I know my decision, and I know like the confidence. And so like now I wear my bike helmet with pride. I love it. So, now I'm just thinking like, if I can do that with a bike helmet, like why can't I do that with other things in my life? If I'm getting these silent shoulds elsewhere, right? Like I just,
like wear what you want, do what you want.
Yeah.
Well, this was the basis for my Halloween costume.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because the silent should was you should be sexy.
Mm-hmm.
You should be really sexy and taking efforts to make sure people notice.
For our listeners,
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really proud of it. I love it.
Tim had a great Halloween costume. I mean,
Thank you.
It was the Swadhisthana chakra.
Swadhisthana chakra. That's right. That's the orange one at the sacral center.
The place that's responsible for our emotions and our sensuality, creativity.
Sexuality and creativity. Yep.
And so it was, in essence, like the sexy costume.
Boom.
Right?
I was going for sexy. Not only was I going for sexy, I know I nailed it. Mm-hmm. But go continue. Tell them in which way I nailed it.
So it was one of those big blow up costumes, a big orange ball, right? This big swirling orange ball of energy. And he just like, would like activate with the bija mantra of Vam. So plug him in and Vam, he'd activate and then just become this swirling orange ball of energy. And like,
but you're making it sound really poetic for people listening. I looked like I was in one of those like blow up costumes. I looked like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, but all orange, just like a big puffy person. I was a puff person. Yeah. I had a really fun time.
You were really fun to witness.
Thank you. I was dancing around and people liked it. If you are watching, you can go to my personal Instagram and see a video of me dancing. You won't regret it. But it was another take on how to be sexy. I feel really proud of it. But it was a reaction to the should, which was the should was I should be in tight-fitting clothes or shirtless. Or
I should put a harness on and some devil horns. I'm a devil, duh. Right. Right.
I'm a devil. Yeah. Next year I'm going as a mouse.
Mm-hmm. Just duh.
Okay. So choosing versus shoulds. I think the takeaway here is just starting to ask the question, like, how often am I doing something because I choose to versus because I feel some form of obligation to. And I think some of those moments are I feel obligated, but I can inject consciousness into it and start to make it a choice. And I think other moments it might be I'm going to start to cut this out or begin the process of cutting this out so that it's not present in my life anymore.
Right. If I think in men's works examples, it's the kind of like the fuck yeses and the fuck nos, right? Like your list of like, what are the like And then there's the maybes, right? And if the maybes can get elevated to a fuck yes, like, okay, cool. If they drop down to a fuck no, like, drop them.
Yeah.
Right. So just like kind of that life audit.
Yeah. Boom.
So with that, thank you so much for your leadership and mentorship that allowed me to get to the place of being able to facilitate a circle like this week. Felt it was an impactful one, and I loved hearing you talk about your experience.
You did an incredible job in the circle, and now, effective January, every second week belongs to you. The sharing circle and the embodiment circle
Belongs to all of us.
well, of course, and it is just the growth of this community that we're building here, and I'm very excited to be sharing this with you and collaborating with you and seeing the impact it's having on the community, the new men that it's brought in, and hopefully one of those men is going to come down this road too, and soon we'll have 3 facilitators, and then 4, and then 5, and then before you know it, bit by bit.
Bit by bit.
Yeah.
Sometimes big bites, sometimes little bites. All right. Well,
Do you feel complete?
I feel very complete. Would you take us out, please?
I will do. So let's all take a deep inhale and a gentle exhale. And let's take a moment of appreciation and gratitude for this opportunity to look inward, to reflect, to share, to feel, to examine, and hopefully step away with insight and awareness about how we want to be, who we want to be, where we want to be. And with these words now, our container is open, but not broken. Aho.
Uh-huh.
Thank you so much for joining us here in the circle. If you'd like to stay connected to us between episodes, please follow us on Instagram at Queer Men's Embodiment. Like, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you find podcasts. And as we leave, now I wish you brotherhood, connection, authenticity, vulnerability, safety, and love. And with these words, our container is open but not broken. Aho.